Hi, I'm Neil Cotter, an associate professor lecturer in the ECE department at the University of Utah, and this is a short biographical sketch. My teaching has covered a variety of areas, but mostly I've focused on these areas, especially circuits and probability and statistics. But I have taught these classes in these other areas as well. And a lot of the material that I've used is available in the form of pages that describe tools succinctly, and those are available on a website I call Conceptual Tools that you can access through my course websites. My research has focused on artificial neural networks, and in the early days, I wrote a paper about the Stone-Weierstrass theorem that describes when a set of functions can approximate any continuous function on a compact domain. This would apply, for example, to Fourier series. And I showed how this could relate to the architecture of neural nets and how you could build neural networks that, if you had enough neurons, would be able to approximate any continuous function with any desired degree of accuracy. I also published a paper that was very popular along with a friend of mine, Peter Conwell, in the literature, especially now. It's being referenced a lot because Google is doing research in this area. But my friend and I discovered that you could actually have a network that learns with fixed weights if, instead of changing the weights inside the network, you actually just had inputs to the network that could act like weights, and they could be updated by having a recursive connection so that the output of the network is fed back into the input. So this is an alternative to having weights that change inside the network. And this alternative architecture has led to a lot of interesting ideas about how to design, for example, neural networks that learn how to learn. More recently, I've been looking at spiking neural networks with my graduate student, Fatima Quistan-Mahalian. And the biological neurons in our brain actually behave this way and are quite different from the simpler summation model that is used in most artificial neural networks. The spiking networks in our brain, what happens is we have synapses on neurons that deliver neurotransmitter when they're stimulated, and that causes a little electrical disturbance at the synapses of the neuron, shown on the left here, and those electrical disturbances sum in the cell body, and when you get enough voltage summation, then you fire the neuron, and it puts out a small electrical spike that travels to downstream neurons. And the key thing about spiking neurons that's different from typical artificial neurons is that all of the information is conveyed in the timing of the input and output spikes. The output spike shape is essentially constant. So the trick is to figure out when will the neuron fire given the firing times of the inputs. And this has never been graphed before, only defined implicitly by functions that sum the inputs. So my graduate student and I, Fatima and I, set about figuring out how to graph this, and we were able to succeed at that. Here's an example of one of the graphs we made, and we published this work in IEEE Access in the last couple of years. You can find it there by searching on my name and the keyword spiking neural networks. Currently, I'm interested in the idea of universal approximation by spiking networks, and it looks like for low dimensionality that what a spiking network does is essentially equivalent to approximating a surface by having hexagons of different heights. If you have enough neurons, you can have very small hexagons, and you can approximate a continuous function with these flat surfaces of different heights, all stacked next to each other in a honeycomb sort of configuration. And it looks like perhaps that in higher dimensions, there is something analogous going on where you can fill the space with the response of the spiking neurons. This is a very challenging problem to solve, but it would be very interesting if we could prove this type of universal approximation capability for spiking networks. So that's my short bio. I'm Neil Cotter at the University of Utah.